Congressman Buddy Carter, thank you for coming to 11 Alive today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start here. A lot of Georgians are worried about the cost of living right now. What are you doing in Congress right now to address that?
Well, that's certainly a reason to be concerned, because the cost of living has gone up, particularly in Georgia. We've seen the credit card debt rate go up tremendously here, which means obviously people are having to use more credit. And inflation has really, during this administration, has gone up tremendously. One of the things adding to that has been the permitting process and the regulation process. Now, how does that impact the normal Georgian? Well, it adds on cost, and those costs are passed on to the consumers, and a lot of times that can happen. And that's one thing we're addressing in the Energy and Commerce Committee that I serve on, and I chair the Manufacturing and Environment, Manufacturing and Critical Materials Subcommittee, and one of the things that we want to address, we have jurisdiction over the EPA, is that. But, you know, look, if you look at the price of groceries, for instance, that can be directly tied back into this administration's war on fossil fuels and on American energy. I mean, the price of gasoline, price of fertilizer, therefore the price of food, all of that has gone up, adding to the inflation that we're experiencing now. And I might remind people that the inflation rate when this president started was at 1.4%.
You mentioned that the bulk of the inflation that we're seeing now happened during President Biden's presidency. Many economists do say that the root, or at least a big chunk of the root of that inflation, has to do with the large amount of spending that began during the COVID era during President Trump's administration. Do both presidents share some responsibility for this?
They share some responsibility, but I think the majority of the responsibility has to be with the Biden administration, because that's where the majority of the spending has taken place. And you're absolutely right. When the government spends more, you have less. We all understand that. And the government has spent more. If you look at the trillions of dollars that this administration has passed, even just through executive order, then you realize that we pumped too much money into the economy, and it's resulted in the inflation that we're experiencing now.
You mentioned something I want to circle back to about climate. You have been an outspoken member of the Republican Party on Capitol Hill about climate issues. I want to, if you'll permit me, you said in a February 2024 Washington Examiner interview, and I'm quoting here, "If conservatives are scared to talk about climate, then we're not going to have a seat at the table when decisions are made." Not all conservatives, not all Republicans in Congress share that view. How did you get there?
Well, first of all, let's keep in mind, I have the honor and privilege of representing the entire coast of Georgia, over 100 miles of pristine coastline. The environment is important to our constituents, therefore it's important to me. It's also my home. It's where I've lived all my life, where I intend to live the rest of my life. The environment is important. We've witnessed some of the impact of climate change, rising sea levels and things of that nature. Now look, I do believe in climate change. I believe that man has an impact on it. I'm not one of these who subscribes to the theory that if we don't have it resolved by day after tomorrow, we're all going to fry. But at the same time, we do need to address it. We need to address it through innovation. We need to address it through mitigation and adaptation, all of those things, but innovation particularly. And we've got to be innovative. We've also got to have an all-of-the-above type energy strategy. Fossil fuels, and one thing I get frustrated with the oil and gas industry, and I'm often telling them this, is that they have not taken the credit they should take in decreasing carbon emissions. We have decreased carbon emissions more in this country over the past decade than the next 7 countries combined, while still growing our economy. We can do it.
You talk about an all-of-the-above strategy. In March, the electric vehicle maker Rivian announced it was pausing its plan to build a roughly $5 billion plant here in Georgia. Is that a threat to Georgia's economy? Is it a threat to Georgia's climate and the nation's climate?
Well, it certainly was not good news. We were disappointed to hear it, although they do assure me that that's a pause and not a stoppage.
And just to be clear, you believe that assurance?
They assure me of that. I don't know whether I believe it, but nevertheless, my hope is that they will continue on with that. Look, we have the largest single economic development project in the history of this state and in my district right now, in the 1st Congressional District, and that is the Hyundai EV plant. When it's finished, it'll be the largest EV plant in the world. A $5.5 billion investment going to create 8,100 jobs, probably that many more jobs in ancillary businesses. We're excited about that, very excited, as you can well imagine. To bring that to our state, to bring that to our region is extremely important. Rivian's announcement obviously was a disappointment, but I do feel like the state of Georgia will be able to get over it if they do indeed end it and don't just pause it.
I'm curious, I'd like to shift gears here. You've been in Atlanta, you've been sort of getting the lay of the land here today. You were unopposed in your primary this year. Mm-hmm. Do you have any plans to run for statewide office down the line?
Well, my concentration right now is I do have opposition in the general election in November, so we're going to concentrate on getting through that, and then God has a plan. I'm a man of faith, and I believe that God's got a plan. I just pray that I have the courage and the fortitude to follow that plan.
You say the courage and the fortitude to follow the plan. It's impossible to know exactly what God's plan is, but you, I'm sure, have some plan as well. Can you say a little more about what you're contemplating?
Well, we certainly, there's no question in my mind that the state of Georgia should not be represented by 2 Democratic senators. We need a Republican senator. We need both of them. All of our constitutional offices are Republican. So there's no reason why we should have 2 Democratic senators.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but correct me if I'm wrong here. It sounds like Congressman Buddy Carter is saying you're at least contemplating a run for Senate in 2026.
I won't dispute that.
Let's shift gears here back. We're talking about elections now. We're about to see a big election this fall in November. It's a rematch of the same 2 candidates who clashed in 2020. There are a lot of echoes of those 4 years ago that are being felt here now. Mm-hmm. In 2020, you voted to object to the certification of the 2020 election results. Do you stand by that decision to vote that way now that 4 years have passed?
Yes, I do. I believe it was the right decision then. I believe it was the right decision now to have done it then. You have to keep in mind, my decision was based on the fact that there were changes made to the voting process by the Secretary of State here in the state of Georgia. And our Constitution says clearly that those changes should be made by the state legislature and not by the state, not by the Secretary of State. I led a call, at that time I was chair of the Georgia delegation, our Republican delegation, and I led a call on March 21st of 2020 with the Secretary of State. It was a Saturday afternoon. At that time he told us he was delaying the election, and he also told us that he had reached a settlement with the Democratic Party that he was going to send out absentee applications to everyone. And we told him we thought that was a bad idea then. He went ahead with that. And, I've always said that I thought that was the wrong decision to make. Was there any problems with voting in that election? I don't know. And I have resolved that I will probably never know the answer to that question. But what I do know is that I think that was the wrong decision. We had so many calls from people in our office who were saying, I just got 4 absentee ballots at my house for someone who lived here 10 years ago. That's disturbing.
I read some interviews after the fact from some Savannah outlets where you seem to be saying your vote was more tied to concerns about the process than necessarily the validity of the outcome. I want to give a chance to just clean that up now that we're in this moment now, so make sure I can understand and our viewers can understand fully. Do you believe that President Joe Biden is the lawfully elected President of the United States?
I do, and I said that immediately after he was elected, after he took office, and I committed to trying to work with him in a bipartisan fashion to move this country forward. Unfortunately, I don't believe that the President has cooperated in that way, and I don't believe that he's worked in a bipartisan fashion.
I've seen you've put out a lot of statements, you've tweeted a lot about immigration lately. Is it safe to say that's a big concern of yours?
Absolutely. I think the top 2 issues coming into this next election in November are going to be immigration and the southern border and going to be the economy. I think that's what people are most concerned with, regardless of what part of the country they come from. Even in my district, in coastal Georgia, they're concerned about the southern border and what's going on there, about the number of illegals who are coming across that border, about the drugs that are coming across that border. They're concerned, obviously, about the economy because they're feeling it.
I believe, and I want to make sure I'm getting this right, because I don't want to overstate things here, but if I have you correctly, in a recent Fox News interview, you said that it's only a matter of time before we have an incident here as a result of someone who came across that border illegally related to national security. In other words, you're concerned about a national security threat due to unlawful immigration coming across the United States southern border, correct?
No question about it. I've been to the border 8 times in the 10 years I've been a member of Congress. The last time was about 2 months ago. I learned a couple of things I did not know at that time. First of all, there are now more non-Mexicans coming across that border than there are Mexicans. Secondly, the street price of fentanyl, according to the Border Patrol agents, has plummeted, which is simple economics. There's so much supply out there now. There's still demand out there, but there's so much supply that the price has gone down from $10 a tablet down to 25, 35 cents a tablet. That's got to be concerning to everyone here in America when we're losing 200 Americans every day to fentanyl poisoning. If we were to have a plane crash and it were to kill 200 people, we'd stop every plane that was flying in this country until we figured out what was going wrong. But we lose 200 people every day to fentanyl poisoning, and what does this administration do? Nothing.
What is Congress doing to resolve that?
We have in the House passed the most comprehensive border protection bill in the history of this country, and that's H.R. 2. We passed that out of the House. It's sitting in the Senate now. The Senate needs to act on that. If we were to act on that, then we would be able to get our border secured. Now, the president has at his disposal the tools he needs in his toolbox to secure that border. He can reinstate the Stay in Mexico policy. He can end catch and release. He can continue on with the construction of the wall. He can do all that at an executive level.
Now, you mentioned that, in your view, the Senate has to pass H.R. 2. I'd imagine there are some senators, both Democratic and Republican, who would say that they, in early 2024, around February, negotiated a bipartisan deal that included roughly $20 billion for funding, additional funding for border security. That deal was effectively dead on arrival, was the language that Speaker Johnson used in the House. It never got anywhere and the deal collapsed. Why didn't the House take up that bill?
Well, 2 things. First of all, that's also going to be introduced again next week, as I understand it, or very soon, by Chuck Schumer in the Senate. And I think it's a political ploy to give some of his candidates, some of his Democratic senators cover. But nevertheless, it'll be brought up again. That was not a border security bill. That was an amnesty bill. That's not what we asked for. Let me ask you something. How many laws do we have on the book right now that say that after a certain number of people break that law, then we're going to enforce it? We were going to let 5,000 people come across that border, and then if you're 5,001, you can't come across, and we're going to prosecute you. That's ridiculous.
I think some folks watching this might hear you and say, fair point. But they also might say, in a situation where there is a divided government, and in a situation where, as you said, some folks strongly believe that the southern border is in a state of crisis, any opportunity to compromise and make some forward progress is worth taking if the issue is this severe. There was a deal, it was bipartisan. Would it not have been worthwhile to at least treat that as a first step and accept it, get it through the House, and then maybe build on it moving forward?
Well, first of all, we never had the chance and opportunity in the House to address that. And I'm glad Speaker Johnson didn't bring it up because, again, I thought it was an amnesty bill, not a border security bill. We have offered the Senate the opportunity to address the southern border, and it's in H.R. 2. Let's negotiate on that. We're willing to negotiate on it. It's a great bill, the most comprehensive border security bill that's ever been out there. But let's negotiate on that.
I want to ask you one last question, then I want to open the floor to any issues you think I might have missed here. And it may be lacking some polish, so forgive me if that's the case. But I think a lot of folks watch politics and they think, boy, oh boy, there are a lot of big issues and there's a lot of conflict around them. And whenever we seem to get close to a resolution, it's always in these massive Frankenstein bills where so many issues are smushed together. And they think, gosh, in my life at home at the kitchen table, I handle one issue at a time. If I have a problem with my kids' education, I deal with that. If we have a medical issue at home, we cross that bridge. We handle them one at a time. Why is there such an issue in Congress with taking one issue at a time, addressing it, and then moving forward?
Thank you for recognizing that. That is one thing that we have really concentrated on in the Republican conference. It's a single subject rule. It's not to be bringing all these Christmas tree bills. Like you bring a bill in there and you light it up like a Christmas tree with everything that's in there. Let us vote on the bill. IRA, perfect example. The IRA had some good things in it. that it did actually, I think, help the infrastructure in this country, but it also had some awful things in it. The prescription drug portion of the IRA is the worst legislation I've ever seen in 10 years in the state and 10 years in Congress. It is the worst legislation I've ever seen. It was part of the IRA. I'm not going to vote for that IRA. Yes, it was bipartisan because 1 or 2 Republicans voted for it, but that's a perfect example of this. The other example is the omnibuses that we passed. We passed 2 minibuses this year, 6 bills, appropriation bills in each. The minibuses or the omnibuses, you know, it's got so much into it. And I struggled with this when I was in the Georgia State Legislature as well. We would have appropriation bills that had so much in there. There were things that I just had to hold my nose to vote for.
Georgia is going to be a big battleground state in this presidential election. 2020 was a high tension time to be a voter in Georgia, to be in Georgia in that moment. What message would you have for former President Trump as he campaigns here in Georgia, and what message would you have for President Biden when he campaigns here in Georgia?
Well, for President Trump, I think he recognizes how important Georgia is and how important it's going to be to his path to the White House. In fact, I've spoken to him about that, and he has acknowledged that he understands Georgia is a battleground state, and we need to win Georgia. It's a red state. As I mentioned earlier, every constitutional officer we have is a Republican. There's no reason why the Republican candidate should not win this state, and I think President Trump understands that. As far as President Biden goes, you know, again, I think he is skirting the issues that matter the most to the people, and that is inflation, and that is the southern border. He's not doing anything at all to address either of those.
Congressman, what did I miss that you want to make sure we address here?
Well, it's been very comprehensive, and I've really enjoyed speaking with you. I do want to brag on my district a little bit. You know, we do have a lot going on down in the 1st Congressional District. And we mentioned the Hyundai plant, the EV plant. That's certainly something we're proud of, but there's a lot more going, especially with the ports. I could not be any more prouder than I am of the Georgia ports. The Savannah Port and Brunswick Port, just phenomenal. Economic engines of the whole southeast United States.
And they've taken on additional traffic since the awful collapse of the Key Bridge in Baltimore, correct?
That is correct. Brunswick is the #2 roll-on, roll-off port in the country. Baltimore's #1. Brunswick's been able to absorb some of that traffic, and that's a good thing. We need Baltimore back. We need to get them up and running again. Our country needs it. We all understand that, but I'm very proud that Brunswick's been able to absorb some of that traffic.
All right. Congressman Buddy Carter, thank you very much.
Thank you.